Yep.
All right.
Tom, how are you? Hear me? Good morning. How are you? This is Mark up in Everett. I'm all right. I just got done traveling. I'm here for this hot, and I'm traveling again.
All right. Good morning, all. We've got Vancouver and Spokane and Tri-Cities and Marcia. I'm not sure where you are. And Everett. Walla Walla and Everett and Pullman. So I'm Rebecca Vandevoort, Assistant Vice President for Academic Outreach and Innovation. We support the use of academic technology to enhance teaching and learning. Primarily on the Pullman campus, we do reach out a little bit when we're talking about online and global video conferencing. We support on other campuses, but we have a number of folks, representatives from every campus who've helped to put together the event today, the Spring Academic Technology Forum. This is our second forum. And so I want to recognize on the Tri-Cities campus, Aaron Brombaugh, Spokane, Carla Early Mariquin and Angela Early, Vancouver, Mike Caulfield, Everett, Mark Beatty, Pullman, Chris Lindbergh, and Brad Clark. And so we've got, this is really truly a system-wide event. We have presenters from every system. If you know the people that I just mentioned on the list, we're pretty much a little bit more on the tech side than the teaching side. But we do understand that good teaching doesn't require technology. You could sit out somewhere in a room or on campus and engage students in a conversation. You could assess their understanding. You could facilitate collaboration. You don't have to have technology, but technology throughout history has enhanced teaching and learning. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, or more correctly, for faculty to talk about how they're using technology to increase reach, to increase engagement, to facilitate collaboration. So you'll be hearing from your peers, although many of you already here are actually the peers speaking, about how they're using technology to enhance teaching and learning. So I don't want to take a lot of time blathering away up here. This morning we're going to talk really about increasing reach and connecting with students who are at a distance. And to start off our conversation, we've got Chuck Blessing, Chuck, what's your title?
Information Systems Manager.
Information Systems Manager for Academic Outreach and Innovation. And Chuck's going to talk about one of the mysteries in the world. What's the difference between a video conference and a web conference? And why might you select one over the other? So he's going to give us an introduction, and then we'll be hearing from faculty who are using one or the other to reach and engage students in different ways. Thanks, Chuck.
Got a lapel mic. Thank you. Hello. It's good to meet you today, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between standards-based video conferencing, which a lot of you might use to teach in one of our classrooms across campus or across the state, and web conferencing, which a lot of us use in our day-to-day workings as well, to just reach individuals mostly, or groups of individuals. My intent here is to just give you kind of an overview of the two technologies. We're not going to go into any real depth because I mean, it's really a topic that you can talk for hours and hours on, and I've got about 15 minutes with even including the section for questions at the end. So really, my intent is that you'll be able to kind of have a general overview of the difference that, oh, I'm doing a web conference, I'm doing a standards-based conference whenever you participate in one. So to start with, I want to say, what's in a name? A lot of us use these company names or product names as verbs to describe the type of conferencing we were doing. So you'll hear people say, hey, let's Skype together, or let's Zoom together. Or you'll even hear them say, let's Polycom together, or AMS together, which is a department name, not a technology or conferencing type name. What the really thing you're doing is you're talking about two different types of technologies or underlying technologies of conferencing. Standards-based conferencing, like I had mentioned before, is what we use in our classrooms typically. You'll see brand names like Polycom or Cisco Tandberg in most of those rooms. Some of them you'll see life-size. There's a couple others out there that make technologies. And in the web conferencing field, you'll see brands and Zoom and like Blackboard Collaborate, Skype for Business. At WSU, we pretty much for the most part use Polycom for our standards-based conferencing. And then we have an enterprise-wide Skype for Business solution that was just introduced in this last year, maybe even just a half a year ago. The university supports a Blackboard Collaborate instance, which is tied into our LMS. Many of you might use that for instruction or meetings. And then even in Global Campus, we use Zoom. I know College of Business uses GoToMeeting. And that can create a lot of problems to get people connected, and we'll get into some of those reasons, right? So I wanted to compare some of these two, or the differences between these two types of technologies. So web conferencing technologies, for the most part, offer very minimal interoperability. If you have a Zoom client, you're most likely not going to be able to call a Blackboard Collaborate client and so forth. And the big difference is that standards-based conferencing, out of the box, you buy a standards-based conferencing device, and it is designed around protocols that communicate together on purpose. Now, they don't always work perfectly. Sometimes there are bugs in it, but for the most part, 99% of the time, those systems are designed for interoperability. So here's a kind of a graphic there that's going to kind of show that. And we have all of these in the web conferencing world that they don't really talk together, but all of those or standards-based conferencing do. The next is that, for the most part, web conferencing technologies are designed around connecting individuals. You have a person in front of their iPad, you have a person in front of their laptop. They use things like small webcams. You know, if you ever look at the little camera on your iPhone or on your laptop, it's just this little dot. In fact, I even brought some to show everybody. So here's a webcam that is actually a pretty good one, and it's just got this really, even all this glass isn't the lens. There's a little dot in the center of that lens that is actually the camera piece, and so it's just a real small image. And if you compare that with a standards-based conferencing camera like we have in many of the rooms that you're at a distance, or we have on this cart, or I've got in front of me right now, it's got a much larger lens. You can see that that's a good, 2.5 inches. And if you compare it, like think about telescopes, the bigger the lens, the better the image, the better the video quality. It's the same thing with cameras. You have bigger sensors as well, so the not only how big that lens is and how much light it can gather, but also how large of an area it can focus that light on will give you a better image quality. Other things you'll see, headsets, small microphones, just like the webcam on your laptop. There's a small little dot hole next to your webcam. That's the mic for the entire connection. But then there's a plus to that. Typically, they're a lot less expensive, and so I kind of talked over some of the other things. So standards-based conferencing is designed for connecting groups. They have bigger cameras so that you can get a better image of everybody in the room. They have better mics. So instead of that little dot on your laptop, you're using a mic that's a pretty decent size and has a really good pickup pattern designed to pick up people in the room no matter where they're at. So here's an example of one of those mics. In the rooms in the distance, you might even see mics hanging from the ceiling. Those are designed for picking up full coverage, 360-degree coverage in the room, whereas with a web conferencing technology, it's very limited. You might be using a headset on your head. It's not going to pick up everybody in the room. At best, you might be using that little dot on your laptop, as I had mentioned. So one of the big things that's going to change this in the future, though, is convergence. So we already see a bit of change in that in some of these web conferencing technology companies, to make money, because that's what they're in the business for. They have created links between their products and the standards-based video conferencing products. So you can dial these types of devices, the Polycoms and the Ciscos and the Tandbergs, into a Skype meeting or a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting. The downside is that they're going to charge you more. It's a for-fee thing, so it's going to add to the cost, the total cost of using that web conferencing technology, and bring it closer to the total cost of a standards-based solution. And then even some of these, so Skype for Business has become a real popular one in the world today. And so a lot of companies like Zoom and WebEx have created connectors between it and Skype for Business. And of course, Microsoft owns both Skype and Skype for Business, so those have native interoperability depending on the Skype for Business instance. And of course, I just want full disclosure, our WSU Skype instance does not have interoperability with Skype yet. I know it's on the roadmap, but it's a feature that has to be implemented, and it takes time and manpower to do it. So hopefully, I think I talked for like maybe, I don't know, probably 5 minutes at most, just because I feel, I went through this a little quickly, and hopefully you've got some questions or something like that on the differences between the conferencing technologies. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question. I'll repeat it for the people at a distance as well as recording. So why would you want to choose one of the technologies over the other? If I choose Zoom, I can do it from anywhere. If I choose if I choose a standards-based conferencing like our systems hosted by AMS and the departments across the state, I have to go to a classroom. So there's a caveat to that. You don't actually have to go to a classroom. We have technologies, and this goes back to that convergence piece that I was talking about. We have technologies here in as part of the WSU system that can allow you to connect from your laptop to a standards-based conferencing. The downside is that so a Polycom system or a Cisco Tandberg system, they have little chips inside of them called ASICs. And they're designed to encode video. They do one thing. It just encodes video or decodes video, compresses it. And so it does it in a really high quality way versus what your computer is going to do. It's doing a lot of things. It's running your graphics card. It's running the clock on the computer. It's one CPU doing a lot of jobs. And it does those really quick, so it seems like it's doing them all at the same time. But it has to do all the compression on that. And sometimes that's a lot of work for that computer to do. So you'll see things like smearing and tiling on the video when you're connecting from your laptop. So it's not an ideal connection. That being said, with this convergence, they're getting closer every day. Computers are exponentially growing faster, and so they do get closer. I would say a big reason why you'd want to choose one or the other is the amount of support you get. At least at WSU, if you look at the amount of support you get, for the most part, if you're using GoToMeeting or you're using Zoom, of course AOI will do all we can to help, but there is a limit as to what we can do. And so with the standards-based video conferencing, it's a handhold kind of thing. We'll make sure that the connection works for you, even if you're using your laptop while you're on the go. We've helped professors do that when they've attended conferences. We've had students who had to get deployed in the military. We've had students who needed reasonable accommodations because of health or wellness issues, and they were able to be successful and connect to it with their laptop into the standards-based conferencing platform. So like I said, why, to come back to what you asked, why would you want to choose the big thing, the number one thing I would say, the amount of support that can be offered between one product over the other, the quality over one product over the other. I'm not saying that you can't have a successful Zoom class. You can, very easily, right? You can. And there are even things in web conferencing technologies that can make it a better experience for a professor. Zoom comes with moderating capabilities. So you can, as a professor, you can have your TA monitor the classroom, and you can have them mute the mics of students who are being noisy. Or you can have all students' mics muted and then have them raise their hand to ask questions in the system. Whereas with the Polycom, or the standards-based system, you're going to, you'll hear those papers shuffling across the state sometimes, and you might have to call us to help or to have us mute a mic at a distance if they're not able to do so. So, I don't want to give any one reason why you would choose over one or the other, because there isn't. It really is a kind of a balance between all of the capabilities of one system versus the other, and what type of experience you want for your students as well as your faculty. As well as the faculty. So yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, what do you worry about security-wise? Is there any difference between the two, security, privacy, when you're holding a class? And the other would be, can you use things like clickers in these systems?
Those are great questions. So the first question is about security. What types of security is offered between the two systems? Pardon me. In most of these systems, the data isn't recorded. It's sent out in real time. So the chances of someone grabbing that data in real time are very minimal. that doesn't mean they can't. I mean, even if you, all of these systems, or I shouldn't say all of them, all the standards-based systems and most of the web conferencing technologies do have encryption built into it or are capable of encryption. So that adds another layer of protection on that as well. But you know, the reality is that if someone, if a nation state wanted to get your data, there's very little things you're going to be able to do to stop them. If they capture your data in real time, even if it's encrypted, give them time, they will decrypt that data and they won't be able to see it. So the biggest security issue you see, though, isn't with, you know, that's a very minimal chance that something like that is going to happen. I mean, less than 1%, less than 1% of a percent, really. But the biggest security you see is physical access. So like in a standards-based conference, you might add too many rooms. Students didn't sign up for, you know, maybe let's say the Yakima site or the Spokane site, but yet no one removed that room from the classroom. It's connected to the class, and some student sees that there's no one in there, and they walk in and they can see and hear what's going on in the class. So that's a downside of the standards-based conferencing. Now, that's a plus is that we do a lot of hand-holding at Academic Outreach and Innovation, as well as all of our partners across the state at the individual campuses. So we will look to see if there are empty classrooms, and we will drop them. We call each other to make sure that, to ensure that that doesn't happen. And then as far as, like I said, the security and the web conferencing technologies, you know, the things can be done like you can only allow certain users who can authenticate as themselves. Maybe it's tied into Active Directory here at WSU, like Blackboard Collaborate. You have to log into the LMS. You're telling the LMS, I am who I am, and you're authenticating as your person. So, you know, only the people allowed in the conference can join the conference. So I hope that answers that question. And then the other question was, and oh, I'm sorry, forgive me, it was, iClickers. So with enough time, enough money, and enough, you know, the right pieces of technology, there's nothing that can't be done. You can deploy iClicker solutions to, you know, any classroom across the state. There are iClicker solutions that are based on wireless technologies, so the BYOD. So those types of systems, as long as they're, you know, no matter where they're at and they're logged into their class properly, they can participate in that, most likely even from home. And I'll be honest, I'm not the person to talk to about those technologies directly. We have people at AOI who are very versed in those technologies and can answer. You know, I couldn't answer on that specific technology. I only, as far as clickers, I only know a general base, and unfortunately, so yeah, sorry. But I do know that there are technologies out there that do allow them to connect from a broader perspective than just the room itself. So it's, you know, but like I said, they will talk about that later. Yeah.
How would you rate the two technologies?
Sorry?
To recording a session?
That's a great question. So he's asking about how would I rate the two technologies regarding in regards to recording a session. And it's actually, if you're looking at standards-based conferencing and web conferencing, it's too broad to really compare. With our implementation in Pullman with standards-based conferencing, we can record any conference based on capacity. We have a capacity of 15 concurrent records. As long as there's less than 15 classes that are being offered, then we can record it. As far as web conferencing technologies, a lot of them have built-in recording capabilities. The nice thing about what we do is that, so we take that recording automatically and upload it to Panopto, which ties it into the LMS so that the student can actually view it. A big thing is it's really easy to record it. It's how do you distribute it? That's a big question that you got to ask. And so like Skype for Business, for instance, it has native recording. So you can record the conference and it'll be recorded to your local laptop, but then the question is, what do you do with that recording? And one of those things is you can upload it to Panopto, but if you're using a Skype for Business solution, it would be, you know, up to you to post it instead of the automated solution that we have implemented. And then I'm trying to think, I believe Zoom has built-in recording functionality as well. It has to be enabled for the conference, but some of them don't. I don't believe Adobe Connect does. I'm not sure about Blackboard Collaborate, I'll be honest, but some of them do, some of them don't. So yeah. I heard a question from the Tri-Cities. I think it was Aaron.
Well, I was just saying, it just, the clickers really just depends on what you're going to use it for. If you want to use it for general class participation, that's one thing. But if you want to use it for grading purposes, then that's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
We've nursing's used them before in both scenarios, and there's online versions. Or if you just want class participation, then you can go with like a Kahoot, which is an online version. So.
Yeah, so with enough time and money, you can find the right solution for practically anything, right? Thank you, Aaron. Are there any other questions?
And I will say,
So there are mics right here, or you could.
so I will say also that that's part of why every campus has some tech support folks, Mike in Vancouver, Aaron in Tri-Cities, Carla and her team, Angie and her team in Spokane, so that we can work with faculty to figure out the actual, which pieces do you want to use, what is it you're using it for, and how can we help you get there. And AOI and Pullman.
Of course. So hopefully you have a better understanding, maybe not a perfectly clear picture between the two types of technologies and the individual technologies on, between some of those web conferencing ones, but just have a better idea of, of what you're doing. Thank you. Ooh, I went long, sorry.
First demonstrations of a few things I have to talk about. So, so I'm Tom Tripp. I'm a professor of management. I've been at the Vancouver campus with WSU for almost 25 years. And can you also zoom in a little bit? Thank you. Perfect. And I started at the Tri-Cities campus, actually. And for certainly the early part in the 90s, I taught most of my courses over AMS between Tri-Cities and Vancouver, as Aaron Brumbaugh may remember, one of my favorite operators.
I do.
So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is mostly about teaching over AMS. Some of it may apply to other sort of web-based video conferencing systems. Some will not. But take what you can here. Now, the other thing I did, and when I first started doing it, people said you can't do it. Anytime you teach over, it used to be called WEDs, but over this type of video conferencing, is that you have to use sort of the standard teaching style of talking, and it's pretty much one way, except for maybe a Q&A. That you couldn't do interaction. That greatly disturbs me because the courses I teach, and not just the way I teach them, everyone teaches these courses the same way, are very interactive. For example, I teach a negotiation skills course, and the whole course is just students role-playing various negotiation roles with each other, and then we debrief how that went. So they play a particular game. If I've got two students there, one of you pretends to be a buyer, the other pretends to be a seller. I give you a little character sketch. It's kind of like improv acting. You go out, you act out and negotiate a deal, and then every student in the class is doing that. We compare all the deals, and I start cold calling students based on their performance, and then from what they say, derive all the concepts and the lessons. Even other classes, you do a lot of case analysis, where students are talking about the cases, a lot of think, pair, share, fishbowl exercises, these types of things, and debates with students all talking to each other. And so one of the most crucial elements to an interactive class like that is the students have to talk to each other. And if video conferencing is used in the standard way, it's very difficult to do. If it's used in a somewhat non-standard way, it's actually quite easy to do. And so I want to talk to you about how to do that in some non-standard ways. The main thing that we're going for here, though, is to get that student-to-student interaction. And that means you have to increase presence. Your presence as the instructor and the student's presence to each other. And so I've got a number of tips that basically allow you to do that. The first thing, and I'm going to organize this somewhat chronologically, so let's talk about things I think you should think about before the course even begins. The first is find a good AMS room. What I mean by a good AMS room is one where the monitor is on, it's a bigger monitor and it's high def, and it's somewhat close to wherever you're standing in the room, so you can actually see it. The other thing you really want is you want the camera on top of the monitor. Some of the AMS rooms, the camera's in a different place than the monitor. And so anytime you're actually talking to students at remote sites, you're talking to them like this, and there's a complete disconnect in terms of presence. Doesn't work very well. Aaron, since you work in that, and Chuck, if you ever get a chance to remodel some of these rooms so all cameras are on top of the monitors, that would be a big help. So that's kind of the first thing. Another thing I want you should do before the course starts is get to know an AMS operator who is on shift when your course is being taught. You will frequently be talking to them. You may be asking for things. You may be asking for Zooms. You may be asking for all kinds of things. Aaron was very easy to get to know in Tri-Cities when I first taught from Tri-Cities to Vancouver and then moved to Vancouver and reversed it. And it was a huge, huge help. And sort of got to know all my preferences and idiosyncrasies. I don't know how much of it you remember now, but it was helpful.
Oh, yes.
Another thing I would say is if you were using a small room where the operators may not be able to pay much attention, get to know the remote control. You can control cameras at remote sites, and you will need to do so frequently. And again, if you're in a large room, then that comes back to getting to know your operator. The first week of course, start from the remote site. Don't start from the local site. There's a couple of reasons to do that. One is it shows that you actually care about the remote students. And this works if it's just one other site or maybe two other sites. If you got multiple other sites, that doesn't work so well. But if you've got just one or two other sites, start from the remote site. They'll be surprised that you did so. It will show that you care. And more importantly, you'll get to see their faces and help memorize their faces. Because as you know from lots of video conferencing, people look different in person than they do on camera. I remember one time when I first visited a remote site, before I realized I should be doing that, and I was starting from the local site, 3 weeks in, I'm at the remote site, and the students looked at me and said, "Oh, you're taller than we thought you were." I wasn't really quite sure how to take that. There's two ways to take that. I guess I'll try and take that the positive way. But anyway, but they look different, and you can make a little bit more of that connection. Another thing you want to do the first week is you want to memorize every face and name. And more than that, which I do in all face-to-face classes. I just take pictures of the students with their name cards. I sit down, it takes me about a half hour, memorize, even with 40 students, memorize every name, walk in the second class knowing everybody's names. It's easier to do on AMS if you get a recording of the first class. You go through all the introductions and you can go back and forwards, and they won't even know that you had the recording. They won't even know that you took a picture. You'll blow their minds. They'll think that you have really excellent memory. But I'm always up for a good stunt like that. But more importantly, you need to know who everybody is, because one of the things you want to do to create this engaging class is you want to grade participation. And if you're going to grade participation, there's fairness issues. And they have to believe that you know who they are. If they don't believe that, then they're not going to put up with you grading participation. So that's another important reason to do that. To the extent that you can, it's a little bit harder. You can try to memorize voices. Sometimes you won't have the resolution, or you'll be too far away from the monitor to actually see who's talking to you. Before each class begins, send handouts way ahead of time. This used to be a bigger issue, particularly before years ago, before classes had websites, and Aaron can attest to this, that faculty would be sending handouts 10 minutes before class began, driving the WETS operators crazy. And it's a little bit hard to do things. So you want to make sure you get all the materials to students way, way ahead of time. You can't just walk in and drop things on people. Much like in any business meeting that we hold over this system from campus to campus, you've seen people do it. Maybe you're guilty of it yourself. You walk in, you have handouts for everybody in the room, but you forgot to send it to people at the remote site. Or you send it to them via email 10 minutes before, and they didn't bring a laptop and they didn't check it. You got to be careful of that kind of stuff. So, other advice. At the start of each class session, in these AMS rooms, I can't really demonstrate it in this room, but often you can, sometimes you can see on the monitor, you can see a monitor with you on it. And whenever that's a possibility, I always wave at myself. And then I basically count when I can see myself waving back. And that tells me what the leg is for the day. And sometimes it's a quarter second. Sometimes it can, in the worst situation, maybe a full second. But even, a quarter second or half second leg, it's not even a full second. That's not going to cause any problems, is it? It's going to cause huge problems, especially when all the students are trying to talk. You have many students trying to talk at the same time because the audio is gated, meaning that the audio only comes through from one site at a time. And so if I'm talking louder than you and you're trying to talk, I can't hear you, right? So you have to sort of control that people aren't talking over each other when everybody wants to talk, or they'll stop talking. And then you tend to lose that. So I want to get a sense of the leg. Another thing that's really helpful is to control hand raising in a particular way. So I would use different rules. So at my local site, when students are in the same room as I am, I would rigorously enforce raising hands. They had to raise their hands. They could not speak until they raised their hands and I called on them. Students at the remote site, though, I allowed them to shout out. In fact, I said, because if they just raise their hand, particularly if they just kind of raise their hand like this, I might not see it. If they're doing this, maybe I'll see it. But if they say, hey, it's Tom in Vancouver, I have a question. I'm like, okay, hold on a second, Tom. And then I'll get back to them. So they were allowed to shout out. Local students had to raise their hands. And that was also another way to deal with the fact that there was a lag. Because if you have a remote student, a local student, both want to answer the question at the same time, the local student always wins. And so that creates fairness issues. Let's see, a few other things. Actually, we can demonstrate this. One thing that drives me crazy in video conferencing meetings and classrooms, and you can see it at all the sites right now. Chuck talked about these beautiful cameras with these big lenses. On the high-def systems, there's 2 million pixels. And what are 1.9 million pixels showing? Tabletops, carpet, and wall. You can't read faces. See, that's Tri-Cities operators. Some to zoom in now. Thank you. You can't really see the faces. Lighting also matters. So, Marcia, I'm going to pick on you.
Yeah, I can
Totally
see
back
why.
that. I have no idea what you look like. Okay? So what you would need to do, and I don't care if you don't have to do it right now, but you would close your blinds and make sure that your lights are on.
Right.
Even to some degree, Pullman's pretty well lit. Vancouver, you're a little bit backlit, but I know how difficult that room is. Tri-Cities, you're pretty well lit, although you're much more lit from your left than your right, because you got the light coming in through the window. Everett, you're way zoomed out. And particularly when it sort of get these tiles, I cannot read your faces. You know what we have here? If you count up all the equipment in all these rooms, we have a $200,000 speakerphone. That's not why these video systems were built. So what you want to do, and if you're going to take video conferencing seriously, the video and video conferencing, you have to be able to read faces. And if you're going to have a class that's highly interactive and you're trying to manage traffic in terms of conversation, you got to read faces. And if you let people choose their lighting, choose where they sit, and nobody takes care of the Zoom, you can't read faces. So what I would always do is I would always make my students sit shoulder to shoulder. Particularly when I taught smaller PhD seminars, that was easier. But so I'd make all the students come to the middle and sit very close together. That way that, you know, I can get a zoom and I could generally read faces pretty well. One thing that you may also want to do, depending on how many students you have in the room, is there's a new, relatively new feature in AMS, and I know Tri-Cities uses this a lot, where when somebody starts speaking, it automatically zooms in on that person, and that person stops speaking, it zooms back out. If you've got a fairly large crowded room, that's a feature that works pretty well. If it's only, you know, a handful of people in that room, then most of the time it's zoomed out so far you can't read their faces. And when you, by the way, you know when you most need to read your students' faces is when they're not talking, not when they're talking. Because when they're talking, you can't have an idea what's going on with them. It's when they're not talking, you really need to be able to read them. So I would disable that feature unless the room is full. Let's see, lighting, we can't be as well made up, you know, as the TV anchors, but, you know, again, turn on the lights, close the blinds, unless, I mean, outside I got my blinds open, but I got the light mostly coming in from this angle lighting up my face better than my overhead lights can. What else can you do? Another thing that helps is particularly with younger students who like to wear hats. I have them remove their hats. And the reason is because if they have their hats on, you can't see their faces. Their faces are in shadow. Now, in a regular classroom, that's not a problem because, you know, you have enough dynamic range in your vision that you can see shadows. But in these rooms, on these systems, there's not enough dynamic range. You can't see their faces. So get them to sit close together, get them to take off hats. And every class, I'd always have to remind them, because it is everybody's natural tendency to be like, you know, a few atoms in a vacuum. They just sort of, you know, bounce off and spread to the far corners. And instead, you don't want to do that. You have to keep against your natural tendency, bringing them back together. Couple other things. When you're doing a lot of student activities, you want to be able to, of course, mute the mics. Otherwise, it gets really chaotic. If you have multiple rooms and there is an empty room, like currently Yakima is empty, that's okay because the door is closed. Sometimes the doors are left open, and what happens is because these which side is dominant is voice or sound triggered, then what happens is that suddenly interrupts everybody else, and then all you can see is an empty room. So you want to make sure that either those rooms are taken offline, or that their mics are muted. Let's see what else. Something that helps a lot in these types of activities, particularly if you're doing role play activities where you're going to debrief afterwards, is to do that the very last thing in class and let students kind of wander out of the room and go do the exercise. And then you have a way for them to enter online or email you the results. You put all those results together. You come into the next class prepared, and then you show them the results. One other thing that reminds me is PowerPoint. Another huge mistake I see people make all the time is their PowerPoint is the center of attention. And this is a problem in face-to-face presentations as well as online, but it's a bigger problem online. And so what happens is you got the PowerPoint taking up most of the screen real estate, and now you can't even really read the speaker. That PowerPoint better be really, really important, and often it isn't. Some rooms, again, if you get a good AMS room, the PowerPoint's on a different screen than the image of you. And then it's kind of okay. It doesn't really matter what you have up there. In fact, you can even bring a laptop on a Surface tablet and use as electronic whiteboard. But what you don't want to do is be sharing the screen with PowerPoint. Unless there's something, you know, I mean, you really got to show a picture or a diagram, there's something really important. If it's just text-based PowerPoint, though, it's usually not worth it. I know students love PowerPoint to some degree. In some ways, they hate it. I've surveyed them about this, you know, face-to-face as well as AMS-type courses. What students like about PowerPoint is they like having the notes. There's other ways to get notes to students without having PowerPoint take up all this video. And another thing is there's a study that showed in terms of teaching that if you give students full-blown PowerPoints ahead of time, then they don't learn as well because they kind of stop taking notes. It's also, by the way, if you're trying to create an interactive classroom and you give out all your notes in advance and students read ahead, you're out of sync with your students because they can read faster than you can talk. So you say something provocative, controversial, funny, it's hard to gauge their reaction because they already read it. So skeletal PowerPoints can work pretty well, but again, like everything else, email that out ahead of time. The last thing that really helps in terms of creating the sort of interactive presence is the image of you that's going out should include not just you, but also include your students. So the students at both sites see each other. And it makes it feel a little bit more like one community. You can even have them, you know, if you do debates in your class, you have one site take one position on debate and the other site take another position. But they should be able to see each other. And I don't know if all AMS classrooms can do this anymore. Aaron, correct me, let me know whether they can. But you always used to be able to give me these composite shots where there'd be, you know, I'd sort of be taking up maybe, you know, this much of the screen, and then the rest would be the students. Is that still possible?
Not anymore, no.
Ah. Okay. That's too bad. Then the other thing, if you can get a room that has a camera angle such that it shows both the professor and the students, that would be better. So just another example. So Chuck, when you were just presenting a few minutes ago, when the camera was kind of spun over to you and people were asking questions, I had no idea who was asking questions. I couldn't see them. You repeated the questions, which was good, although the mics in that room actually worked pretty well. But it'd be kind of nice to be able to see the people who are asking questions. And if you don't have an operator who's active in panning the camera around, or somebody who's really quick with the remote, then you don't quite create that same presence. So you'd want to somehow make sure that you at least have some of the students in the shot with the professor. I found that helped immensely. So that's basically a few tips that I learned from my days teaching on AMS. And I can go ahead and stop there. I don't know if we have time left for questions or want to do questions later. Or Rebecca, how would you like to? What would you like to do next?
I think we will go on to the next presenter and take questions at the end. So, Alan Felsot in the Tri-Cities.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, so so I'm Alan Felsot. I'm a professor here at the Tri-Cities. My home unit that I have my tenure in is in the Department of Entomology and Commerce, but I'm also an affiliate professor in 2 other units, including the School of Environment and the School of Biological Sciences. So I'm going to be talking to you about how you can be in more than 2 places at one time, taking advantage of AMS. So the first thing is, why did you pick me? Because I've been a faculty member at 2 universities now for over 38 and a half years, and I've been here at WSU since for 24 years. And I started using WETs, I think the first year I could document when I actually used the WET system, which for those of you who hadn't been around during that period, the Washington Higher Education Television System, where all transmissions were, TV signals through microwave. About 1995. So I kind of got used to it early, and it was really cumbersome and lumbering, but it worked, and it allowed us to deliver courses across the state. And then when AMS was developed and then transitioned to internet streaming, things got a lot better and a lot more flexible. Now, my particular appointment is actually split among 3 sort of components. The research and extension have kind of gone down. And the reason why I'm telling you this, in addition to being an administrator here, I have a lot of public speaking experience that I've documented, probably close to 1,000 public presentations over my career. So I'm used to doing public speaking, and I allow my, speaking skills, you might say, to kind of carry the class. And in a way, that's kind of a disadvantage for me because I'm taking a lot of high-impact training practices, but because I'm so used to doing public speaking and controlling the situation in a room, and also kind of comfortable with telling jokes and little side comments, that can actually be a disadvantage sometimes in teaching. But both things in common, you have to use visual images to facilitate communication across many audiences. And actually what I do is I prepare slides that I can use in multiple locations. And the difference is, depending on the audience, I can change the kind of language I use and step the audience through it. So what I want to do is talk about first some of the issues. How do you clone yourself across many campuses and not go insane? These are my teaching, spring 2017 teaching responsibilities. Now, I don't suggest anybody try this at home. It's actually a pretty heavy load considering all the other stuff I do. Plus I have a scholarly life that's actually off campus. This becomes more feasible the more often you teach and the more often you work on refined things. It actually is potentially possible using AMS. And I'm going to show you how I organize things to kind of be able to do this. So not only do I have in-classroom classes, but I have global campus, 3 online classes. This is what I'm offering in the spring. And then I just have a 1-credit seminar class that I sometimes forget to go to since it's on late Friday afternoon. No, actually, I'm just kidding around. I do go to it. So, you know, as with any class, the first thing to do is make a detailed syllabus. And I mean, when I say detailed syllabus, my syllabus, which includes the lecture schedules, and also I used to teach lab courses, so lab schedules too. My syllabi run anywhere from 6, 7, 10 pages because to me a syllabus is a contract between you and the students. Also, I put a trapdoor statement in the contract that I reserve the right to change the syllabus as the class needs warranted, and that way at least the students are on notice, assuming they read the syllabus, that things may change and to be aware. I keep everything digital. I actually handle very little paper these days. As a matter of fact, even in my administrative job, I use my image signature as much as I can. I try not to handle any paper, and I use basically Blackboard as your cloud to do that. Students can access it freely, and you can upload any kind of media that you want to. You have to remember, though, to tell the students repeatedly, read the syllabus, read the syllabus. The other thing I learned, especially last year when I just was so overloaded and tried to figure out how to do everything in a day, I realized the students were telling me I kept on changing deadlines and whatnot. They got confused. So this semester I'm doing much better in making sure I stick to the deadlines. Let me get my cursor up here. So I want to show you something. What I do, I build into my syllabi exactly when assignments are going to do. I let them know the date they're going to do ahead of the particular day in the syllabus line. My writing assignments are called challenge assignments. I think writing assignments is maybe has a pejorative to it, so I call it challenge. You know, challenge is much more interesting. I give exams. Typically, if I wasn't teaching so much and didn't have other responsibilities, I actually, I'll have another slide on this, but I do my exams asynchronously. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. This year, in order to give myself an extra day for doing other things, I basically made a day for exams and all my courses all on the same day so I could sync it up. By the way, you won't see any textbook references here. I've eschewed completely the use of any textbooks at all. I'll buy a textbook myself. That's what the community thinks should be taught. Of course, I have my own ideas. I use the primary research literature and mostly the graphics that I get from all the journals. The modern graphics, especially in review articles and scholarly literature, are just phenomenal these days. So I use as much of that as possible. Okay, so using it effectively, AMS. I pretend I'm not using AMS. I act just like I do if somebody comes to my office, or I'm giving an extension talk to a handful of people. Hundreds of people. It's the same each time. But one thing about using AMS, as Tom was saying, you do need to check those screens once in a while to see what's going on in the remote classroom. And when you're really gearing up and really getting into the zone of giving your lecture, you have to really pull yourself back into some kind of spatial reality and realize that there's other people out there. Now, the other thing about AMS, and I'm showing you here this is I'm fortunate in that I've actually, the second year in a row, I have a class that I'm able to teach in 101T over in the Food Science Human Nutrition building, which is convenient because that's right across from my departmental office. This is what the classroom looks like. So a lot of these classrooms have a, I don't know what you call it, a dais or something, and this one's nice because you don't have to stand behind it and talk. You can come around here, you can go in the front, back here. This is what it looks like from my viewpoint. These cabinets would open up and you'll see the students. Now this is a pretty good room. The screens are really large. The camera will follow you up to a certain point, and it depends on the particular room layout. The other nice thing about AMS that I like is the lectures are all video streamed to an archive using Panopto software. Although I think you can opt out of that, but I never opt out of it. I do have a couple of students that if they have a class conflict and they really need something to kind of progress in their credit accumulation, I'll let them watch the course asynchronously, but they're responsible for everything. So I was saying that some of these classrooms are not as good as others, or maybe more limiting is a better way to say it. So this is a Panopto actually shot from a video I was doing. This shows me in one of our classrooms here at the Tri-Cities. Now this is what it's looking, and there's a very little distance here between where I'm actually delivering my content from and here. So I can't and there's also a step down. So I can't really move too much, but notice how I never stand right behind the dais. I always come out to the side here. I kind of move back and forth. I make sure I use my hands because the students, remember, they can see everything. Gotta get my cursor back here. The major things are in their own folders. Now, lecture notes, challenge assignments, exams, the report, all of these correspond to subheadings as much as possible in the actual syllabus. And within the folder underneath the information, I'll have due dates. Sometimes I'll need to change these, but I actually have always put a little note so the student can follow out what they're going to do. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'm going to open up the lecture notes. So I'm going to go to the lecture 2 folder. And so what I do is my students get all of my notes first. What I do is I make them a keynote. I can translate in PowerPoint, but sometimes it doesn't translate well when you're going to a PC. But I make PDF files. I used to put 4, maybe 6 slides on a PDF page. Students told me that it's hard for them to read that, even I use big fonts. So I'm just doing single pages now, and then I compress the file so that they don't have to download something that's 10 megabytes. I'm sorry. Maybe I try to get it less than 4 megabytes. I'm conscious of limitations they have. It's easy to put all this stuff in. I'm going to show you about pre-recording a lecture here, and I'm going to tell you why I do that sometimes in my classroom classes. But I depend on the students reading the literature. I never test them specifically on literature. What I tell them is, if you want to understand what's going on, you have to understand the flow of the language, and the best way to do that is read a lot. Just read these experiments, and you'll understand the flow of the language. You don't have to do so much memorizing. Anyways, if you're going to build content, you have all the possibilities of what you can do, and you can see here on the bottom, I gave them a web link. I wanted to go to this website because I ripped off some of the pictures from it. I put it into a lecture, and I wanted to have access to the website. It's kind of cool. So you can put this stuff here. I'll get to the pre-recorded lectures here in a second, but one of the advantages of pre-recording lectures is that you don't need to cancel a class. You can pre-record the lecture using the Panopto software. And so when we've adopted Panopto software, and I've done this when it used to be, and I can't remember what the software used to be before Panopto. Integrity. I've done this with Integrity, right? Integrity. I've done this with Integrity. Now, to record your own lecture, you have to download the Panopto software so it's resident on your hard drive. But basically, the students are using the software in the cloud. Then this is what the screen looks like from a recording session from my home computer. It keeps a log of everything you do. After you log in, you could actually send your video and audio right to the Blackboard cloud. You could put it on your local hard drive and then upload it later. But I discovered that the way Panopto works is it separates the audio file from the video file. So unless you have Panopto software, those files are basically useless. So I don't record them to my computer anymore. I just upload them to the cloud. So you can tell it where to go into your course settings and things like that. You have to always make sure your course is, how would you say, ready for Panopto. There's a little thing you go to, and I don't have time for that. But here's your Panopto under your tools, the icon tools right there. So that's a possibility, and then you don't have to cancel. So whenever I have to do something, scholarly activity, or something I need to be off campus, I can just record lectures and then we don't skip a beat. Now for my writing assignments, I call those challenge assignments. Optimally, you want to get all your challenge assignments into the course space at least before the course starts, or you could build it out as the course is going on. But this particular course, because I'm simultaneously delivering the course online for global, and I'll mention that when I talk about how the global looks, everything had to be ready to go. So the challenge assignments, so you use assessments, that's where your assignment boxes are. This was an exception up here, that's a test or survey icon. This first one, I did a survey and they can get points if they tell me a little bit about themselves. This particular course, we're focused on pests, and I wanted to know what pests they wanted to study, what they wanted to do when they get out of college and whatnot, besides washing dishes or working at Burger King. The challenge assignments, I give them both. I basically copy the rubrics into the course space. A lot of these, sometimes I'll have them a template that has subheadings, and then they write their stuff into the template because it's much easier to grade stuff when you have subheadings. I'll show you rubrics in a minute. In some cases, I want them to read stuff. You could attach files right into the assignment space. So this is how it looks to the student somewhat, although I think I have this in edit mode. Look obviously a little bit different to the student. When they go in there, there's they can upload all their stuff right there. So you also have the possibility to personalize your assignments by making individual student user groups, so you can have more than one student, although in this particular case I'm showing you from a course I taught in the fall. It's a general entomology course. And here, I really wanted them to have practice doing, it's a writing in the major course, so in addition to the standard stuff we're supposed to do in writing in the major, I also wanted to have an oral presentation experience. So what I did is I discovered that with undergraduates, you want to assign them a specific paper that they own. So I had to make them individual user groups, so each student I can assign a specific set of papers. They choose one. Now, this particular one, I only had about maybe 35 students. I have to actually look at all these papers, see what's appropriate for their, I guess, what I consider the conceptual level of understanding. It takes a lot of work on my part, but I think it's a richer experience. And the reason why I like oral presentations, what I notice is students that just, half of them really flub up on my exams, they just shine like graduate students giving a talk at a meeting. I mean, they've really impressed me. They seem to be very oral and very visual in terms of their sort of showing you what they know. It's really been fascinating to me. So I create these individual user groups, and this is what it would look like once they clicked on the icon and went to the space and whatnot. They choose things. Now the other thing too is when I do oral presentations, I actually show them how to do it. I have a primer that I use across classes on how do you give an effective oral presentation based on my experience in doing public presentations. And then I actually, this past semester, I actually took an article and I actually did a 10-minute oral presentation that is supposed to simulate what they're supposed to do. So a lot of them don't really know what to do until you actually show them what to do. So when you grade writing assignments, you can create rubrics. You can change these rubrics. You have to understand that all your exams and all your rubrics are stored in separate places that you actually, within the assignment space or the exam space, you actually, when you create the exam or modify, you're actually going out to a separate URL within the software and bringing those in. But it does allow you to move things around pretty easily, move them between courses, etc. So typically what the students do using a template, this particular case is a challenge assignment using a template. Basically I created these headlines for them or subheadings so they would fill this in. I don't have time to, I don't have time to edit writing, although I do believe the writing's quality has improved over the years, especially as English 101 has become a really, really major thing that students have to pass through the gauntlet. So they put that in there. It's much easier to grade this. I can quickly go down, did you meet the standards or not? I create all these rubrics that correspond to the headlines, and then I have the, I don't know what you call this, a modified Likert scale, meets expectations, not. At the very bottom, which you can't see, I have the option to kind of modifying those point totals that are built into the rubric as I feel it's necessary. And then, of course, you want to send everything to the grade book. One of the things that students complain about, and the reason why the faculty senate voted for having midterms is students would seem to be clueless about, tracking their grades. But with Blackboard and the grade book, all their grades will track very easily, and they're responsible then for looking those over. And of course, once they're in the grade book, you can go in and modify these things, re-examine their exam, re-examine their writing assignment right from each line for each student. Okay, so there's no need to waste time on exams is my philosophy. I try to make them asynchronous. And Now, I'm a big believer in open book exams, and you might say, well, gee, how, what are you really testing? And I can guarantee you from many years of doing this that their performance on the online exams is every bit as poor as on the in-class exams. As a matter of fact, I can always tell when students never bother reading the notes, finding out where stuff is, because I can actually see how much time they're spending on the exam. I give them a 36-hour window to do the exam. They can save it and come back to it, as long as they do it within that 36-hour windows. And I can tell that some of these students are spending 6, 12. I've seen exams open for 20 hours, although that might be total cumulative hours. And that tells me they haven't read the notes. But the good news is I know they're finally reading the freaking notes, okay? So that is a success, right? So I organize all my exams, and in this particular course, all the exams have already been made. They're in their own folder. And then when they open up the folder, they go to the exam, and of course you can hide them as you need. I don't really open them up until a particular date. I tell them, I usually build extra credit into the points. A lot of them aren't very good with their algebraic skills, so they don't know really how to figure this out for their total cumulative, but I can give them the formula and then they shut up. Okay, now, one of the nice things of building online exams is you could pick pictures in there, color them, and you can ask them questions about that picture. You could put scenarios. This particular one I like because I live right near an orchard. When I go through that orchard a certain time of year, there's a lot of apples. That's very bad for a pest called collywog. And so I created a scenario, and I basically asked them, I forget what the actual question was. It was, let's say you're a consultant and you inspect, then, okay, what would your priority recommendation be in this? And if they didn't answer, you clean up all that crap on the ground, because it harbors pests, then they would have gotten it wrong. But the thing is, you can build any kind of scenario you want. Also, I noticed a little trick. One time with the Mac and even the PC with the modern Windows programs, you can grab frames from the internet and just kind of push them into the Blackboard space, but they may not render. There's a problem sometimes, so make a specific image file and then upload the image file, and then you won't have any problems. One time I had a disaster where I was just pushing things in without actually uploading a specific image file. It showed up on my screen, but it didn't show it up theirs, and it screwed up the test and invalidated it. So always use an image file that you're uploading into your exam. And again, there's all kinds of tools to do that. I don't have time to show you the tools. Okay, Global Campus is a little bit different. It's a little bit more constrained, but I must say, to their credit, when I started doing online courses, I was really restricted. We were using a piece of software. It was kind of crummy. I had very little control of it other than creating my own PowerPoints with oral, with my voice. And then they would have to be rendered by the global people. But now, using Panopto, I don't have any problems with that at all. The constraint comes in that I think there is a bit of a philosophy. We'd like to see some commonality, although I don't think it's that strict. This is what Global outline, or I guess let's call it the template that Global created for me in my online course. And so I'm just going to open this up and show you what I'm doing. Now, in the online course, there needs to be more textual, text context, I guess you might say, or text communication, because you're not there every day, and it's completely asynchronous, of course. So what I started doing is taking my agendas, turning them into an outline, and then taking my sort of wrap-up slide and creating a narrative, or sometimes I'll just use the outline of the wrap-up. And so that's there. That's called my overview and learning goals. Then under read, I put the notes in, and then here's my Panopto video lesson. And I completely was in charge of that. I recorded the video myself and uploaded it. Now, what I'm doing is something a little bit rebellious, I guess. I'm actually sort of laying down the tracks on this course while I'm actually delivering the lecture in my in-class course, because I was kind of on a time crunch. But what I do is this. So AMS is recording me on Panopto to go to the class video streaming site. What I do is I actually record myself on Panopto. So if I have class instructions or idiosyncratic information for the class, I don't start recording myself for the online course until I get that out of the way. And then I do the online course. Now, sometimes a student wants to ask a question, so what I do is I pause the recording, answer the student's question, and then go back to it, because that could be really sort of either disconcerting or disorienting to somebody who's taking your online course. So far, it's actually working pretty good. Now, obviously, you might be getting the message like, well, does this guy ever stop and take a breath and let a student say anything? Actually, very little, because I know how to do public speaking, and I engage the students in that way. Now, in the course I'm just referring to, because I'm getting the lectures done with 5 to 10 minutes to spare, I do hold a discussion within that class, and the students have been more forthcoming in asking questions. I would love it if they actually challenged me more, but obviously you can get a little intimidating. So some of the parting shots then is I do make arrangements to drive. I've been doing this a lot, and typically in the spring I'll drive up to Pullman once a week. This year I've actually delivered my lectures more from Pullman than I have from the Tri-Cities campus. I just want to kind of give you a little bit of philosophy of why I still continue to teach, even though I've been a faculty member in 2 universities for over 38 years. To me, teaching is the opportunity for me to learn and broaden my horizons beyond my scholarly myopia. And I really enjoy that. I'm a bibliophile. I like looking up stuff of all kinds. And also, I'm very intuitive, right? We all know our field so well. We're really intuitive of what we know. We don't really think about slowing down the way our brain works and putting that into words. And so it's really a challenge to deliver content and information in language that even your grandmother would understand. So I find that challenging. I'm still working on that, but that will be one of my goals. And most importantly, have fun. Yes, I know it's sometimes a pain in the ass. But if you have fun and you show fun and you show exuberance and passion for what you're doing, that will help carry the students through your course very well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Just want to let everybody know, not to be rude, I have a class that starts at 10, so I have to leave promptly at 10. So, Mark, I might miss the very ending of your talk.
Okay, and so Mark Beatty is up next.
Okay, well, great. I don't even know how I'm possibly going to be able to back up, and come in after Tom and Alan. Oh, wait, sir. Oh, there's more people here. Is this thing on? Can you guys hear me okay? Oh, now, hopefully you guys got the handouts. I sent them, but if not, just come up close and like take a picture or something like that, and we'll move forward from there. Okay. So, thanks for coming. No, seriously, you can make a lot of mistakes with teaching with AMS, and hopefully these will be a few things that both Alan and Tom emphasized, and we'll kind of wrap up with some mnemonics and such. So let me share a little bit of content. We've got Dr. Jacob Murray over here in Everett, and myself. I teach in the College of Business, School of Hospitality Business Management, and Jacob is with Electrical Engineering. We both started at the same time in 2014, and we were solo ships over here, and much like Tom related it in terms of starting up Vancouver, and the folks in Tri-Cities can remember, it's sometimes a very lonely ship that you're on, but you need to connect via AMS to be able to deliver your course content and to give your students the opportunity to progress, because eventually they run out of classes that they can take from us. And so we need help from other campuses to progress our students. We likewise need to share in that and to present using the technologies that are available to us. So I'm going to go through a few do's and don'ts, and hopefully just have some fun and reiterate some of the things that have been talked about, but then also leave you with a little bit of mnemonics to remember it by. So I came up with the 6 P's of success. Preparation. As was mentioned by both Tom and Alan, you need to be prepared if you're going to teach using technology. You need to have everything worked out. Now, my courses are hybrid courses, so much of the content is delivered online, and it's the expectation that the students actually come prepared. They've done the reading, they've reviewed the videos, they've done the exercises, participated in discussions prior to them coming onto the classroom site. Because with the hybrid format that we have an important face-to-face component of it, which is a 3-hour seminar. And so obviously standing behind the camera and teaching to a PowerPoint during a 3-hour seminar is annoying, and for heaven's sakes, I would fall asleep. So I'm going to show this slide shortly, and the 6 P's of success: preparation, practice, provide, present, and please. And now I'm going to turn it off so that we can talk to each other and see each other a little bit. So, as part of the preparation, all of my courses have a script. I've got to follow a script. If it's 3 hours, it needs to be a whole nother approach to teaching. You need to engage. It's much more like a professional development workshop. You need to have breaks in between where the students engage with each other, and that might be engagement within a particular locale or between different locales in the co-location. So you need to have that ready. You need to have your slides, your materials, all of your links prepared in advance and ready to show the content so that it flows nicely. If you have activities, the materials need to be at all the different sites that you're going to be working with. Practice. Practice your delivery not just in the site that you'll be predominantly sending from, but also go to the remote sites. So when I'm teaching a hybrid course, it's 7 weeks. I spend 2 of those 7 weeks in the remote sites for many of the same reasons that Tom mentioned. Engaging the students across the state, engaging them, getting to know their names is critically important. And so that's important from that aspect. Practicing with the technology is also important, so that you know how to operate things on both sides and you're familiar with the setting and the content and the context on both sides of where you are. So practice. Look for the sweet spots. Get the lighting. The first thing I did when I came into this room was open the shades so we can have some natural lighting. So lighting is important. Being able to operate the zooms, like right now it's showing on me in the zoom feature. Know where the microphones are. So we have a large array microphone that's in the ceiling right above me, so I'm standing here. Also know where the microphones are if you have directional cameras, so those are positioned right there. And if Jacob starts talking, Jacob, say something.
Hello. Maybe it'll come over to me. No, it's not. It's not doing it.
It will.
Oh, there it went. Takes its time. Maybe if I keep talking. There we go.
So that's the lag that Tom was talking about. If you have directional cameras on both sides, then you've got actually a few seconds while the camera locks in on that person and zooms in for you. The other annoying and part that you need to allow your students the forewarning for is that if they are eating in class, it will also pick up, because what the camera is looking for is not just hearing what's going on, but it's looking for the lips moving. Actually, from teaching I was over in Pullman and beaming back to Everett, and the students in Everett were enjoying some chips, some Doritos, actually. And all I was doing was focusing on the students every time that they would crunch down on a Dorito. So it was pretty hilarious, but I told them, hey, if I wouldn't have been teaching in Pullman, I would have had no idea that that would have been going on in Everett, right? So get to know both sides. Provide the handouts on the locations. Provide any materials. If you're going to have activities that entail, say, flip charts, felt pins, have someone get those into the room so that the students can fully participate and fully engage in the activities. Otherwise, they just check out. They'll push the mute button and you've lost them. So, present. Pay attention to the lighting, as has been mentioned. Background sounds. What's happening behind you. So look at where you're standing so that you're able to really provide the best part. Here's an important part. If you've got multiple locations, muting when you're not talking so that you're not picking up other things that are going on. Having the content ready and display it only as you need to. And then make contact through the cameras. Like right now I'm looking directly at the camera and not at the screen. So position of where the cameras are. If you've got a camera over here, you're talking off to the side. We experience that quite a bit in meetings and such that we have here at our remote locations. And then please engage. Get to know your students at all locations. Get to know their names and engage them in conversation. So bounce discussions off of the locations. Bring everyone into the experience. So for instance, Rebecca, ask the folks that are there in Pullman, how many of them have taught using AMS to, for instance, over to Spokane? None. Okay. All right. Then let's hear a different poll. And can you guys down in Tri-Cities, let me know which is your favorite location to AMS between of all the different campuses? Do you have a favorite?
Technology-wise, my favorite to do is Vancouver, actually.
My opinion is it depends really what room you're in. So it could work, and you have to be very adaptable. I actually also AMS courses to the Connors Agricultural Experiment Stations too. That's why I showed all those pictures in my presentation. So, but you know, you just be adaptable. That's all I can say.
I want to say something.
Yeah,
Is
go
it
ahead.
on? This is Vancouver. Can I say something?
Yes, please. And your name,
Hey.
please.
Okay, my name is Andra Davis. I'm faculty with the College of Nursing, and we have the challenge and privilege of teaching at about 5 or 6 sites often. So, you know, the little pictures at all the different sites become really, really small. And some of those sites don't have a tech monitor available to help out. They have to, the students in the room kind of have to know what's going on to Zoom or do whatever. They just don't have any help. So anyway, I like to go to, my favorite place to go out to is Spokane.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for jumping in on that. And oh, excellent. Jacob, where's your favorite site?
Well, the only site so far has been Pullman, so
Okay.
that's all I know so far.
Great. So getting to know and engaging people that way so that you can really take advantage of what we have available to us. This is an opportunity for Washington State University to be able to teach to the entire state at any one time. I mean, this is phenomenal. Look at this monitor right now. And we're connecting the entire state. This is taking advantage of what the land grant mission really is all about. And so taking advantage of it and engaging in ways that are going to be possible for us. The final P that I have for you is post-mortem. All of these sessions are recorded, and then you can review. You can review yourself. How did you come across? What other things would you have wanted to see if you were a student, not just in the locale, but also from a remote site? So let me bounce back to showing the content here real quick for a final review. So 6 P's of success: preparation, practice, provide, present, please engage, and then finally postmortem. And check for understanding, not just within your class, but also from your own perspective. What can you continue to do better? So if you have any questions, you're always welcome to come, A, visit us here in Everett, and B, send me an email or give a call. Later on, after you get the archive of these presentations, I encourage you to check in on these 2 video links that I have just when you need a good laugh. So thank you so much for joining us. Much
Great.
appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Tom. This has been great. Lots of helpful tips. I think we can go through this archive and pull out and and make tips for faculty. So we have just a couple of minutes for our break, 5 minutes, and then we'll start our web conferencing session. Does it? Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, we had a question for Tom.
Is he still there?
Yes.
So I guess this is sort of back to the whole Zooming issue. Do you, when you want to Zoom, you want another campus to Zoom, one of the external sites, do you ask the tech people to do that? We can't do that from.
Historically, if there are operators who are listening in on your class, if I know they're listening in, I'll ask them. Otherwise, what I usually do is the remotes can actually control cameras at any site. And now it depends exactly which software you're using for AMSs in the room. They're a little bit different in terms of layout. But most of the ones I found, I can control the cameras at any site. And so you have to go several clicks in. You have to go through it, but it's worth learning before your class begins to how to do that.
Okay. I have another little question, just something that you said made me think about this. You talked about taking hats off and such, and there was just a theme throughout everybody's presentations about engagement. And so one of the challenges that I often find in a live classroom or otherwise is sort of asking students, if you're not working on a laptop, do you ask them, do you have any policies around, laptops down when you're working in teaching? I think Harvard's one of the places that has a policy tops down or something like that in class, unless you're doing some sort of exercise that requires the computer.
And so I do now. I didn't used to. My attitude used to be is try and beat whatever they could find on the internet. It's kind of a challenge. And then I came across a couple studies that changed my mind. One of which shows that the distraction factor is greater for the people sitting next to them than for the person actually on the computer. About double the decrease in performance as measured on exams and so forth. There was that. And then secondly, another study came out that showed that taking notes on laptop is inferior to taking them by hand. And so once I saw those two, I banned them, except when they're like doing an exercise in class. And students, I have not gotten any complaints. I give my reasons up front. So this is the reason I'm banning it. No problem, no objections.
Thank you.
And I generally work towards trying to incorporate the technology into the classroom. So I try and pull in the technology either via their phone or their laptops in some of the exercises, in some of the communication tools. And I've got to say, I've still got a learning curve on that one. So I think the jury's out on whether I would have a laptops down policy. I don't at this point, but things can continue to evolve and change as that moves forward.
This is Alan Philsott from Tri-Cities. I have no policy about digital. My philosophy is these are adults and they should follow the golden rule and they should be courteous of their neighbors. I do agree with Tom though, even personally I take notes digitally, but I've also taken them by hand. I think it actually does help to take things by hand, but since I try to be paperless, I don't mind if they're using their computers for taking notes.
All right, great. Well, I think we've got our 10 o'clock presenters here, and it's 10 o'clock. So I think we will move. Brad, do you want to?
Thank you, everybody.
Rob. So Rob Baker is here from Academic Outreach and Innovation. And Rob, what's your title? Collaborative Technology Support Coordinator. So Rob is very actively engaged in our web conferencing tools and looking, I think, specifically or as well at mobile and what's really useful on mobile devices. But he's going to give an introduction to web conferencing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take just a couple of minutes to switch videos, PowerPoints, and any other critical things.
At best, you might be using that little dot on your laptop, as I had mentioned. So one of the big things that's going to change this in the future, though, is convergence. So we already see a bit of change in that in some of these web conferencing technology companies to make money, because that's what they're in the business for. They have created links between their products and the standards-based video conferencing products. So you can dial these types of devices, the Polycoms and the Ciscos and the Tandbergs, into a Skype meeting or a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting. The downside is that they're going to charge you more. It's a for-fee thing, so it's going to add to the cost, the total cost of using that web conferencing technology, and bring it closer to the total cost of a standards-based solution. And then even some of these, so Skype for Business has become a real popular one in the world today. And so a lot of companies like Zoom and WebEx have created connectors between it and Skype for Business. And of course, Microsoft owns both Skype and Skype for Business, so those have native interoperability depending on the Skype for Business instance. And of course, I just want full disclosure, our WSU Skype instance does not have interoperability with Skype yet. I know it's on the roadmap, but it's a feature that has to be implemented, and it takes time and manpower to do it. So hopefully, I think I talked for like maybe, I don't know, probably 5 minutes at most, just because I feel, I went through this a little quickly, and hopefully you've got some questions or something like that on the differences between the conferencing technologies. Yeah.
Most often is, why should I put technology together when I'm teaching a class? So if I'm going to use, if I'm going to AMS, I have to be in a special kind of classroom. So why wouldn't I just use Zoom?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'll repeat it for the people at a distance as well as recording. So why would you want to choose one of the technologies over the other? So you'll hear people say, "Hey, let's Skype together," or let's Zoom together. Or you'll even hear them say, let's Polycom together, or AMS together, which is a department name, not a technology or conferencing type name. What the really thing you're doing is you're talking about two different types of technologies or underlying technologies of conferencing. Standards-based conferencing, like I had mentioned before, is what we use in our classrooms typically. You'll see brand names like Polycom or Cisco Tandberg in most of those rooms. Some of them you'll see life-size. There's a couple others out there that make technologies. And in the web conferencing field, you'll see brands like Zoom and like Blackboard Collaborate, Skype for Business. At WSU, we pretty much, for the most part, use Polycom for our standards-based conferencing. And then we have an enterprise-wide Skype for Business solution that was just introduced in this last year, maybe even just a half a year ago. The university supports a Blackboard Collaborate instance, which is tied into our LMS. Many of you might use that for instruction or meetings. And then even in Global Campus, we use Zoom. I know College of Business uses GoToMeeting. And that can create a lot of problems to get people connected, and we'll get into some of those reasons, right? So I wanted to compare some of these two, or the differences between these two types of technologies. So web conferencing technologies, for the most part, offer very minimal interoperability. If you have a Zoom client, you're most likely not going to be able to call a Blackboard Collaborate client and so forth. And the big difference is that standards-based conferencing, out of the box, you buy a standards-based conferencing device, and it is designed around protocols that communicate together on purpose. Now, they don't always work perfectly. Sometimes there are bugs in it, but for the most part, 99% of the time, those systems are designed for interoperability. So here's a kind of a graphic there that's going to kind of show that. And we have all of these in the web conferencing world that they don't really talk together, but all of those or standards-based.
Oh.
Yep.
All right. All right, good morning, all. We've got Vancouver and Spokane and Tri-Cities and Marcia, I'm not sure where you are. And Everett. Walla Walla and Everett and Pullman. So I'm Rebecca Vandevoort, Assistant Vice President for Academic Outreach and Innovation. We support the use of academic technology to enhance teaching and learning. Primarily on the Pullman campus, we do reach out a little bit when we're talking about online and global video conferencing. We support on other campuses, but we have a number of folks, representatives from every campus, who've helped to put together the event today, the Spring Academic Technology Forum. This is our second forum. And so I want to recognize on the Tri-Cities campus, Aaron Brombaugh, Spokane, Carla Early Mariquin and Angela Early, Vancouver, Mike Caulfield, Everett, Mark Beatty, and Pullman, Chris Lindbergh, and Brad Clark. And so we've got, this is really truly a system-wide event. We have presenters from every system. If you know the people that I just mentioned on the list, we're pretty much a little bit more on the tech side than the teaching side, but we do understand that good teaching doesn't require technology. You could sit out somewhere in a room or on campus and engage students in a conversation. You could assess their understanding. You could facilitate collaboration. You don't have to have technology, but technology throughout history has enhanced teaching and learning. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, or more correctly, for faculty to talk about how they're using technology to increase reach, to increase engagement, to facilitate collaboration. So you'll be hearing from your peers, although many of you already here are actually the peers speaking, about how they're using technology to enhance teaching and learning. So I don't want to take a lot of time blathering away up here. This morning we're going to talk really about increasing reach and connecting with students who are at a distance. And to start off our conversation, we've got Chuck Blessing, Chuck, what's your title?
Information Systems Manager.
Information Systems Manager for Academic Outreach and Innovation. And Chuck's going to talk about one of the mysteries in the world. What's the difference between a video conference and a web conference? And why might you select one over the other? So he's going to give us an introduction, and then we'll be hearing from faculty who are using one or the other to reach and engage students in different ways. Thanks, Chuck.
Got a lapel mic. Thank you. Hello. It's good to meet you today, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between standards-based video conferencing, which a lot of you might use to teach in one of our classrooms across campus or across the state, and web conferencing, which a lot of us use in our day-to-day workings as well, to just reach individuals mostly, or groups of individuals. My intent here is to just give you kind of an overview of the two technologies. We're not going to go into any real depth because I mean, it's really a topic that you can talk for hours and hours on, and I've got about 15 minutes with even including the section for questions at the end. So really, my intent is that you'll be able to kind of have a general overview of the difference that, oh, I'm doing a web conference, I'm doing a standards-based conference whenever you participate in one. So to start with, I want to say, what's in a name? A lot of us use these company names or product names as verbs to describe the type of conferencing we were doing as conferencing do. The next is that, for the most part, web conferencing technologies are designed around connecting individuals. You have a person in front of their iPad, you have a person in front of their laptop. They use things like small webcams. You know, if you ever look at the little camera on your iPhone or on your laptop, it's just this little dot. In fact, I even brought some to show everybody. So here's a webcam that is actually a pretty good one, and it's just got this really, even all this glass isn't the lens. There's a little dot in the center of that lens that is actually the camera piece, and so it's just a real small image. And if you compare that with a standards-based conferencing camera like we have in many of the rooms that you're at a distance, or we have on this cart, or I've got in front of me right now, it's got a much larger lens. You can see that that's a good, 2.5 inches. And if you compare it, like think about telescopes, the bigger the lens, the better the image, the better the video quality. It's the same thing with cameras. You have bigger sensors as well, so the not only how big that lens is and how much light it can gather, but also how large of an area it can focus that light on will give you a better image quality. Other things you'll see, headsets, small microphones, just like the webcam on your laptop. There's a small little dot hole next to your webcam. That's the mic for the entire connection. But then there's a plus to that. Typically, they're a lot less expensive, and so I kind of talked over some of the other things. So standards-based conferencing is designed for connecting groups. They have bigger cameras so that you can get a better image of everybody in the room. They have better mics. So instead of that little dot on your laptop, you're using a mic that's a pretty decent size and has a really good pickup pattern designed to pick up people in the room no matter where they're at. So here's an example of one of those mics. In the rooms in the distance, you might even see mics hanging from the ceiling. Those are designed for picking up full coverage, 360-degree coverage in the room, whereas with a web conferencing technology, it's very limited. You might be using a headset on your head. It's not going to pick up everybody in the room